Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this extraordinary panel meeting. Thank you, members, for coming along, and thank you to the officers. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent. They're not used to make or receive calls whilst this meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? No, and we haven't got any members of the public, so we'll move on. Speaking under 20.1, I've got the following members who have asked to ask a question this evening. I've got Councillor Manners on item 8 and Councillor Towning on item 9. I've not received any requests for public speaking, so I'll move on to that. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. I've had Councillor Wing being replaced by Councillor Garner and Councillor Cupp being replaced by Councillor White. Have we got any more apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Pope.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Okay, any declarations of interest? Oh, sorry.
Apologies from Councillor Dabrow, replaced by Councillor Bright.
Thank you. Item number 2, are there any declarations of interest? No, no declarations of interest. Okay, item 3. The first item on the agenda this evening, the Broadstairs Flood and Coast Protection Scheme. I will now call on Mr. Humber to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the Broadstairs Flood and Coast Protection Scheme is funded via the Environment Agency and local levy grant funding to the value of £880,000, and that's in the 23-24 capital programme. The pier at Broadstairs was first constructed 250 years ago and plays a vital role in stabilising the beach. And it's that beach at Viking Bay, in combination with the more recent concrete sea walls, that protects the low-lying residential properties directly behind the beach. If the coastal defence, including the pier, were to fail in the next 20 years, 54 homes are expected to be lost to coastal erosion and 95 homes in the next 100 years. The scheme will reduce flood risk, that's flooding by the sea, to properties on Harbour Street in Broadstairs and also to the rear of Viking Bay. With the effects of climate change causing sea level rise and increased intensity and regularity of storm events, the risk of doing nothing is that these low-lying properties will experience flooding more regularly. The jetty is an important beach control structure, and if damaged or lost, it would have the effect of narrowing the beach profile at Viking Bay, leading to a loss of amenity on the beach and also that more frequent flooding and eventually cliff erosion as well. The scheme includes works to the facing blocks of the pier, the concrete blocks that form the fabric of the pier, repairs to the fisherman's slipway, repairs and improvements to the sea walls, and repairs to the cobblestone steps to the foreshore. It also includes resurfacing to the car park and installation of timber floodgates. The scheme will improve the standard of flood defence from the current 1 in 10 year standard to a 1 in 200 year standard. So that is a 1 in 200 year storm would be required to cause flooding after the works are completed. Planning permission for the scheme was granted in June, and tender documents have been prepared, ready for competitive procurement. The construction phase is likely to be programmed from April to June next year. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members, have you any questions or comments you'd like to make on that report? Oh, no? Okay, so we'll move on. So we're asked, if there's no recommendations, just to note the report. And that's all noted. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 4, the Viking Bay to Dumpton Gap sea wall repair scheme. I now call on Mr. Humber again. It's all about you tonight, Mike, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this is another capital coast protection scheme, and it's immediately adjacent, actually, to the Broadstairs Flood and Coast Protection Scheme. So, this is a capital maintenance project between Viking Bay and Dumpton Gap. It focuses on an 1,100 metre length of seawall between Preacher's Knoll at Viking Bay and just to the south of Dunton Gap. The seawall there is about 60 years old, and many of the structural components, such as the concrete apron blocks and wave return copings and the berm slabs on the top, the promenade slabs, have become eroded by wave energy and tidal action. Following a successful application for grant funding via the Environment Agency's Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Fund, a sum of 406,000 has been allocated to this scheme. Worth saying the council has 11 miles of seawall, and such large-scale refurbishment projects are important to maintain the existing infrastructure that we have around our coastline. Without undertaking works of that nature, we'd be in a position where sort of our seawalls and popular coastal promenades would in time need to be closed to the public on health and safety grounds, and sort of the damage to those walls from storms and the loss of the fill material would be detrimental to our internationally designated coastline. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Again, members, have you got any questions or comments you'd like to make? Councillor Green.
Just to say that I'm really pleased that timely work like this is being done, and you know, we're not waiting for a catastrophe to happen. But I was today walking along Ramsgate East Pier, and that seems to have suffered some quite significant damage recently, and I wondered if there are any plans to look at that, or what the officer felt.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor Green. So the East Pier at Ramsgate is inspected by the maintenance team at the Port and Harbour. I don't know specifically the damage that you're referring to, but it's certainly something I'll inquire about and look into. And clearly, that's an important structure for the harbour, and it's also a Grade 2 star listed structure. So it's important that we maintain that.
Councillor Bright.
Yeah, thanks for these reports. Really clear and useful as always. I guess my first question probably covers both agenda items, and it's really around the programme of works. Is there going to be a published full scheme of how this work is being carried out? I'm just thinking from the point of view of any businesses that might be affected by the construction work in the area.
Yes, when the programme is confirmed, there will be engagement with local businesses, and we normally do a statement, a media statement about the works going on. The timing of these sort of works is always very sensitive. We have to avoid the overwintering period, largely because of the effect that will have on overwintering birds that are nationally and internationally designated in some cases. So, yeah, and obviously the summer period is very important for local businesses and the amenity value of the promenades. So it's quite difficult programming things, but in all cases there's consultation with anyone who will be who may be affected by those works. And historically, from experience of doing these sort of schemes, every effort is made through programming to minimise the impact on local business, to make sure that we complete the works that we need to with good consultation and minimal impact.
Thank you. I have another question. About 3 months ago, on the cliff top in Broadstairs, just by where Eagle House is, there was a really severe sinkhole. I guess it was about 15 foot deep, 20 foot deep. Now, obviously, I'm not sure what caused that, but has there been a full survey, or will there be a full survey carried out across this entire patch, just to make sure that there is, we have mitigation in place for any further sinkholes, or is it structurally sound, or is there going to be long-term problems with the integrity?
Okay, so I'm aware of that failure that occurred on the promenade at Broadstairs, and that's a fairly unusual situation in that there was a loss of fill material behind a concrete wall, or a wall which is by Eagle House, and it was very likely caused by groundwater moving and washing the fine material out behind there and gradually causing a hole to occur. Generally, that's not the case around the rest of the coastline, in that where there's exposed chalk cliffs, it's more predictable in terms of what happens with the promenade. It's worth saying that the technical services team undertake routine annual inspections around the entire coastline. So that's the promenades, the upper promenades, lower promenades, groins, steps, seawalls, everything is inspected, hand railings and what have you. There's also a programme of repair works to cliff-facing structures, so precisely the sort of structure that we were talking about in this instance, where the hole occurred behind it. But there is sort of proactive, preventative inspection work going on around the coastline on a routine basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mike, for your presentations. The only reason I'm bringing this up now is because of the comments that Councillor Bright just made regarding the sinkhole. So you also probably are aware that we have quite a large heavy goods vehicles driving and reversing up and down that seafront area, to the extent that a CCTV camera was knocked over and disappeared in your care or TDC's care, never to be replaced. We're wondering why that's not being replaced. Every time we ask, we're given an excuse that it's now UK Power Network, they can't get power to it. But the CCTV cameras were quite important for checking and monitoring the antisocial behaviour that was happening at that particular time. And the barrier where these vehicles gain entry, I believe one of the companies that was renting for filming or renting to use the green Victoria Gardens there, they damaged it. I believe it's been repaired now, but if we don't have these monitored and these areas protected and preventing these vehicles from doing what they're doing, as there's no reason for them to drive up the promenade, they can reverse up past the public house Dickens and their bin men can walk the bins up to their trucks. It's because they don't want to. And we just need to be mindful that this is something that Broadstairs is suffering all the time, and we are raising it through the channels to TDC, but it doesn't seem to be being resolved in a speedier manner, which is sometimes a bit frustrating for the local councillors. So I just thought I'd bring that to your attention as well. Thank you.
I think we've gone a bit off piece there with this report, but okay.
So I am aware that the CCTV camera was knocked over. It was probably 2 years ago or something like that now. I will have to find out what the latest position is with replacing it, or whether the plan is still to replace it. But perhaps I can get an officer to contact you about that and update you, if that's okay.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just congratulate officers on bringing in the Environment Agency funding, but ask about the process for that? Is that competitive funding? So if we've got this money, so Dover hasn't, or whatever, is that how it works?
I suppose in a manner of speaking, yes. So the funding criteria is sort of outcome measure based. So we need to prove through sort of a technical report, through a study, what the level of risk currently is and the number of properties being protected. So the outcome measures are a function of those things. There are more applications than there is funding. So the funding is from DEFRA, but the Environment Agency have a strategic overview, so they actually administer the fund. And there are certainly more schemes. There's a red line, if you like, beyond which schemes wouldn't receive funding. So yes, it is competitive. Yeah. Yeah.
Councillor Bright.
Yeah, I'll make sure this is my last question. I've kind of dominated this one, so apologies. I was just going to ask you about the projected lifespan of the work we're doing, because obviously, if this was built 100 or so years ago, the world has changed, and probably the pressures that any works are going to come under over the next 100 years are going to be a step change, probably worse, let's be honest, than has been for the previous 100 years. Are we changing the design or the materials that we're using? Is this future-proofed, basically, is what I'm asking? Good
question. Obviously, seawalls have an incredibly hard life. They have to resist the forces of wave energy and freeze thaw and all those things over a very long period of time. All the design work that we do now and for some time, probably for the last 20 odd years that we've been doing, it always takes into account the effects of climate change. So the UK climate change projections are updated over time, and we always work to the latest standards. And the requirement is for the seawall to be able to perform at the end of its design life, based on what the sea level rise and the if you like the increased storminess, the increased intensity of the storm will be at that point. We design for a 100-year life, generally speaking, for a seawall, with the acceptance that it will require periods of major maintenance during that time. But it's normally, the economics are normally based on a 100-year life. So if you like, this scheme is designed, or the Broadstairs Flood and Coast Protection Scheme is designed sort of 100 years forward, and the sea level at that time. So that's the level of design that's considered.
Okay, members, any further questions? Councillor Davis.
I'd just like to record how pleased I am that this work's being done, because the protection of the coastline is absolutely vital, and we do have a particular plethora of protections on them. Without going off piste, this is the Broadstairs protection scheme. Just while we're here, Mike, if I could ask, Ramsgate, Western Undercliff, the wooden berms,
Yes.
the breakwaters are in horrendous condition and all the rest of it. Is there any plan to refurbish or support those? Because they do stop longshore drift, obviously.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, so those were obviously originally put there to stop longshore drift before the port was built. So
Right.
the port has largely superseded the requirement for those groins, although they do hold a bit of material in the corner.
Yeah.
The plan with those, because we have to plan for the limited amount of resources we've got, is to keep them safe, but not necessarily
But
to
just let
replace
them-
them. Yeah. So make sure they're safe, that they're not they're not a danger to the public.
No, I can see the logic in that,
Yeah,
because of course
yeah.
we have views on the port and its impact on the tidal flow anyway in other
Yeah,
areas.
so, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thanks. But for the record, excellent scheme, and it's vital we protect our coastlines. Thank you.
Okay, so do we wish to make any recommendations before we send this report off to Cabinet? No? Okay, so if we all note the report, please. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5, the LED street lighting contract. Again, I call on Mr Humber.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a capital scheme in the 23-24 programme. The council is responsible for about 500 streetlights around the district. This project will result in improvements to approximately 200 of those, with works including either a new LED lamp or an LED, brand new entire LED fitting, or a new column. Through stakeholder engagement with Broadstairs Town Council, a contribution has been secured to undertake works at Victoria Parade and on Broadstairs Harbour, including festoon lights, which will all be LED. Tender documents for this work have been prepared, and the planned timescale for this is for it to start in January next year and be completed by July next year. The lighting improvements are right across the district, so it's not all in one place. There's various lights based on inspection and need are right across the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mike. Those of us who are on Broadstairs Town Council as well as TDC Council have sat down with you to discuss this recently, specifically around the contribution from Broadstairs and St Peter's Town Council. So I know I'm here as a TDC councillor, but I will mention a concern maybe that we have, or I have, without wanting to speak for anybody else, as a town council, about the 50,000. So you mentioned that obviously this project covers lighting across the district.
Yes.
There is a focus on some of the Victoria Gardens area. I mean, our concern, or my concern, sorry, would be that the town council, I believe, approved a contribution of up to £50,000. So I would like to ensure that if this money was used, if needed, for the Broadstairs related elements, and not used, say, if to cover the costs of lighting upgrades in other parts of Thanet, because there's a budget there already. So when we see I assume there will be a more detailed breakdown of the costings, and if we are able to achieve delivery of this project at less than the total budget, which is the 2885 plus 50k, then the bit that won't be spent will be part of the town council's 50k, rather than that being the first bit that's spent, if you see what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. To clarify, the contribution, I think, is for enhanced lighting, so festoon lighting and enhanced lighting, that if we were just doing the work to provide amenity lighting, we wouldn't do that work. So I think the contribution is for a higher specification of lighting. It certainly won't be spent elsewhere. The money from Broadstairs Town Council will be spent on Victoria Parade and at the harbour, which I think is where that higher specification festoon lighting will be installed. So yeah, absolutely, it will only be spent on the investment at Broadstairs. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And this is coming back to Cabinet, isn't it? On Thursday. Okay. So, all right. Thank you.
Councillor Bright.
Thanks again to echo Councillor Garner's words. This is a good report, and obviously we're, as with our Broadstairs hat on, we're really happy that this is happening. Obviously, in your report, you say the work is going to happen between January and July. Is there a prioritisation of areas? So obviously, this is covering Broadstairs Harbour. You know, by the time it gets to Easter, we're well into. You know, we start to get visitors to the area. It would be amazing to have everything in place as far as possible, ready for the time that we get visitors coming into the area. So is there a plan in place to make sure that we're maximising? And I guess it's the same for Ramsgate, central Ramsgate, and areas in Margate as well.
The simple answer is yes. Every best endeavours will be made to programme such that it doesn't impact, so that we're doing the sort of quieter areas later on in the season. I mean, just a note as well, of course, this will need to work around or work with the Broadstairs Flood and Coast Protection Scheme, which is also programmed for next year. So we can't have two things going on top of each other. But so there needs to be a bit of careful programming. But again, minimising impact is important. So endeavours will be made for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Austin. Go on, Dave.
Quick and simple question, which is quite good coming from me, I think. When KCC have replaced a substantial number of the street lights, for instance, I'll quote Spencer Square, they claimed, and this relates to the location and the heritage aspects, particularly with the parks and things that we're talking about here, there were some very disappointing decisions taken there, and what they did was ripped out heritage posts and columns rather than just replacing the top of with a unit, and said they weren't compatible. Now, there are heritage style things. Can I just confirm that we're not going to do what's happened around me, where we've suddenly got a metal industrial looking pole that's completely incongruous with the area? Are we going to sort of obviously look, I know it's more expensive, but will we be preserving that?
So the majority of the work is new lights on top of the pole rather than the pole. There are some columns that need to be replaced. where those are in a conservation area or there's a conservation need, then those would be replaced with the similar type. It's probably something I need to confirm to you because I haven't got all the detail of where others need to be replaced and what the type that they'll be replaced with. So I think it's something that I can come back on, or I can get an officer to come back on. Yeah. Yeah. No. It's a fair point. Yeah. But it's obviously, I didn't highlight earlier, but another key driver for this project is it fits with the with the net zero strategy, and LED lighting has a much lower maintenance footprint. It will last a lot longer without having people having to go and replace bulbs and climb up columns and that sort of thing. So it fits with all those things as well.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say well done on the LED lighting, etc. I was also going to ask a similar question to Councillor Davies, which is about where you do have to replace a column, making sure that it's appropriate, etc. I think at one stage there used to be a point you could stand in Ramsgate where, as you looked around, you could see 7 different styles of lighting columns. We don't want that. We don't want that. It's got to be coherent with the surroundings, and I'm pleased to note that. And if you are sharing information on that, it would be great if you could share it with all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, and totally agree, and I will get more detail and share that. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Britcher.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And hi, Mike. I just wanted to ask, so you said there were 200 street lights being upgraded. Could I just ask whereabouts in Thanet will those be? Because obviously some in Broadstairs, but where will the others be? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, so they are spread around. So the list, I've got a table in front of me. So it's Broadstairs, Cliffs End, Birchington, Cliftonville, Dane Valley, Ramsgate, Kingsgate, Margate, St Nicholas, Minster, Acol and Westgate. I can provide a table with how many in each, but it's across the district that the works go on. So we have a schedule and an inspection regime for those 500 lights across. So this is based on the most urgent need that these works are being done. So happy to share a bit more detail on that.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Could I ask, does this scheme include the sturgeon lights?
The sturgeon lights in Margate or Ramsgate or both? As far as I'm aware, it doesn't. No. But again, it's detail I can check on.
Okay, any more questions, members? No? Okay, we'll ask before we send it off to Cabinet, to make any recommendations. Are there recommendations we wish to make? No? Okay, so we'll ask to note the report then. Okay, moving on to item number 6, the Coastal Zone Maintenance Contract. And again, Mr. Humber.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Coastal Zone Maintenance Contract. We have 16 miles of coastline around the district that's maintained by the technical services team. And that includes 11 miles of seawall, upper promenades, railings, steps, bridges, groins, slipways, all those sort of assets. They're maintained through a maintenance contract with a 5-year contract with a contractor a civil engineering contractor, which is due to expire in January 24. This is about putting in place a new contract to continue that work. It's proposed to put in place a 3-year contract with a 2-year extension option, which is actually the same as the one that we have now, which is going to expire shortly. This is base budget funded revenue maintenance work. It's informed by regular detailed inspections of the coastline by the technical services team. Without this contract, we'd be unable to react to urgent and routine repair work to ensure that we get the maximum working life out of our coastal infrastructure. We would also, without this sort of contract, be open to an increased level of insurance liability because of the condition of the asset would gradually deteriorate. The budget value for this each year is £244,000, but there are occasions when there is an advantage to deliver other maintenance work via this contract So approximately £300,000 per annum is spent on this, giving the contract a value of 1.5 million over those full 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Members, any questions? Councillor Bright.
So when the current contractors have delivered their work, do we have a review process with them? Do they come back and when is that conducted?
Yes, so I mean, it's worth saying that there are several hundred works orders placed every year on this contract, and the technical services team administer that. So some of it is from those inspections, some of it's from reports from the member of the public or observations made on site that it could be anything from a piece of broken railing to surfacing repair, trip hazards. And the team put out those works orders, they administer the work, they supervise not everything but a proportion of the work, and then inspect the work before it's paid for. So there's a regime to running through that process and completing the work.
So we have a degree of confidence that the work is coming in at a standard that we require?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
I mean, yes, it's inspected, and anything that doesn't meet the requirements. I mean, there is a specification in the contract. There are drawings to say, standard details of repairs and things. If they don't meet those standards, then the contractor will be required to rectify those defects by whatever means would be agreed with the engineer.
And is this going out to multiple contractors?
No, so this isn't. So we many years ago we had a schedule of rates process with many contractors on a list that you could call off. For the last certainly 10 years, we've had a single contractor win the project, win the contract for a set period of time. So it's competitively tendered, and they win it. So it is a single term maintenance contractor who carries out the works based on a schedule in the contract.
But that was my question. So it's going out to tender then?
Oh yes. So this is
yeah.
competitively
Great.
competitively tendered. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Any further questions, members? Councillor Austin.
I just clarify that to open tender, so anybody appropriately qualified could apply. There isn't any kind of a call-off list or anything like that anymore.
No, yes. So this is open tender because of the value of it. This triggers the full requirements of the public contract regulations, and yes, it's open tender. Yeah.
Councillor Bright.
And when it comes to making that decision to select the contractor, is this coming back to overview and scrutiny, or it goes to cabinet, does it? So who makes that decision, basically?
Yeah. So the money's in the budget, and the cabinet decision will give officers the authority to award that contract. The contract itself has sort of quality and price criteria in it, and it's a competitive contract, so there's an evaluation process. Once the winning contractor is identified, a contract will be awarded by officers through the legal service. So there won't be another member decision on that.
Okay, members, we're asked to make any recommendations. No recommendations, so asked to note the report, please. Okay. You can have a break now, Mike. Moving on to item number 7, the new contract for the supply of electricity to 264 sites within the TDC portfolio. So I call on Mr. Sanham.
Thank you, Chair. This report invites members of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel to review the Cabinet report for the Council to enter into a new contract for the supply of electricity to 264 sites within TDC's portfolio. The Council is required to ensure best value for money when procuring its contracts, and as such, the Council is required to re-procure its electricity supply contract before the renewal date, which is the 1st of October. It's coming to this meeting, obviously, because it's in excess of 750,000. The Council's current electricity supply contract comes to an end at the end of September and requires re-procuring. We've been through the appropriate process, used laser to tender the contract, and have identified a supplier. There's an anomaly with this one in that in previous years, due to the price of electricity, it wasn't actually deemed a key decision. We could have let the contract, it wouldn't have come through this process. But because of the ongoing increases and the instability within the utilities market, it's effectively ended up in excess of the 750,000. So it's effectively brought here for you to review in order to make any recommendations, if you so wish, before it goes to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I've got Councillor Austin and Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask why it's coming to Cabinet so late before the end of the contract date. Is that to do with the way that the process works and the cost of the electricity or whatever? It feels like a bit of a brinkmanship sort of way of going about it, but presumably there is a rationale for it.
It's exactly what I said. It's unusual in the context of in previous years. For the whole time I've been here, so I've been here 25 years, we've never had to bring it as a key decision. So we were late finding out that it was in excess. It was going to be in excess of 750 and therefore in excess of a key decision.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Councillor Austin for asking exactly the right questions.
And Councillor Gunner.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to check that these 264 sites, are they all TDC estate offices, housing? I mean, they're no properties that we let out.
I can't say whether any of them are let. If they're let, then the cost is passed on. These are 264 of the main sites that the council operates, and that does include the housing estate as part of that. There may be properties within there that are run our industrial estates, that therefore have a power supply if they're empty or whatever in terms of standing charges. I could check if you want me to see if any of the properties are let, but it'll be minimal.
No, I mean, I think you've said if they are let, then the cost will be passed on. So a minimal portion of this will be recouped through the rents that we charge out.
Essentially.
Any further questions, members? Okay, so I presume there's no recommendations, so we'll send this off to Cabinet. Moving on, item 8, the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, Funding Update, Simplification Pathfinder. I do have Councillor Manners wanting to speak under 20.1. I think if it's a question, I think I'll let Miss Askew do her presentation so we don't sort of ruin that, and then you can ask your question afterwards. Okay, Miss Askew.
Thank you. So we've bought this paper on the basis that it's going to the next Cabinet meeting and is the key decision. Obviously, it impacts on a number of wards in terms of the process. So the Council's been lobbying central government in order to simplify the process around the three capital programmes that we've been awarded: the Future High Street Fund, Town Deal and the Levelling Up Fund projects. We have been successfully awarded over £50 million of capital funding for projects across Ramsgate and Margate, and most of these programmes were covered within the presentation that I provided to this meeting on the 20th of July by way of an update. On the basis of this being included within the pilot suggests that we are also one of the more successful local authorities in this country in terms of the funding that has been awarded. We're one of 10 local authorities to be part of the, I was trying to think of the word, the simplification pathfinder pilot. We are going to have to find an easier term for it. Two of which are in the southeast, and I know that Lewis has had about the same amount of funding across the different programmes that we've had. It's important to note that this pilot is about governance and managing reporting back to central government rather than starting again in terms of deciding where the funding should be spent. The projects have already been agreed and been through the formal government approvals and our own processes that are being included within this pilot programme. So there are a number of key elements outlined in the report. There will be one single allocation across the portfolio. So we have a grant statement that says government have given us this amount of money and that means that we will have XYZ remaining for the rest of the programme. However, on a project by project basis, we have individual budget sheets and they will remain in place and we will be checking projects against those. There will be, alongside that, there's a single set of outcomes and outputs across the whole of the portfolio. So in Annex 1 of the Cabinet report, we've profiled each of the projects across the new intervention themes around connectivity, unlocking industrial and commercial development, strengthening the visitor and local service economy, improving quality of life for residents, and employment and education. And then within those are a set of indicators which essentially match those that were in the Town Deal and Levelling Up Fund programmes with slight changes. So we've just mapped those across. They will be what we report back to central government, but again, on a project-by-project basis, we still have those targets that we initially put forward within those projects. So we will be reporting on those internally to amalgamate them up to central government. I think I said at the presentation at the last meeting, we had 3 different reporting mechanisms on the 3 different programmes, which took up an awful lot of officer time. We will now be reporting once 3 monthly, red, amber, green, focusing on spend and progress, and then 1 6 monthly, more robust report with more narrative around project delivery. Improvements to the change in management will mean that we're not queuing for 8 to 12 weeks for approvals on changes to any of the projects. We did have one in for the Future High Street Fund, and it did take nearly 12 weeks, and we were advised that there had been 50% of the programmes had gone back for a project adjustment. So it's a way of central government trying to minimise that burden on both the local authority and central government. So any changes over £5 million within the programme go back to central government for approval, but underneath that they are approved through the local authority as the accountable body, and a commitment has been made that those changes will be made through a cabinet decision. And then lastly, there'll be one main contact. So we have a Towns Fund contact, we have a Future High Street Fund contact, and we have a Levelling Up contact, and then we have a Cities and Local Growth contact. Those will be amalgamated, which means we have much clearer reporting and support from central government, and our Cities and Local Growth contacts have been really useful in helping us through this programme and the development of the wider programmes. So central government requires the council, as the accountable body for this funding, to establish a consolidated governance structure, which will be a strategic oversight board. The cabinet report includes the proposal to create a new oversight board to cover the pilot projects. We are required to have certain people on the board, including all levels of government, so county, district and town councils where we have them, the MPs, and so we will have both of our MPs invited to participate on the board, and then businesses and or investors and representatives from the community. It's not a decision-making board, but they will support the council in terms of reviewing delivery, budgets, timescales, risk and that monitoring and evaluation process. We welcome this engagement with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Having improved contact, as I said, with the department will make it much easier to engage across the whole of government. We've had an awful lot of support so far. We also welcome the fact that through our engagement with the department, they have concluded that Thanet District Council can be part of this pilot. Our understanding is the outputs from this will be used to inform the department on how they engage with local authorities in the future on these capital programmes in order to understand how they can better deploy and manage the funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, I'll come to Councillor Manners first before I'll open it up to the panel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Louise. What will the process be for us as individual ward councillors to find out and scrutinise the delivery of projects within our respective wards? How frequently will we be updated, and how? Is this solely with regard to the quarterly and 6 monthly reporting that you mentioned, or will there be other opportunities, and how will that work exactly, please? I'm also concerned, in the light of cost inflation, that money may be moved from one project to another to facilitate delivery. How will the community be involved in that process? Will they have a say in how money is taken from one project to move into the other? And again, what would that process be, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So, as you know, we recently held a public event in Ramsgate for the Ramsgate Levelling Up Fund projects. We are planning future ones, which will allow not only ward councillors but the broader communities to come together and understand where we are in terms of the delivery of the projects and to be able to feedback on the rebus stages as we work through those. We will obviously be bringing all of the procurement contracts to Cabinet. As you've heard this evening, we've had a number of those already, and some of those are scheduled in for this financial year. So that will come through the overview and scrutiny, and then through to Cabinet as well in terms of that approval process. We are, where there are specific things where local communities can be involved, we are working through those, particularly if they're around things like job opportunities or delivering specific services out of them for our communities. So there'll be some work around that. We are always updating the website. We are always providing information into the Loop and Colin Carmichael's fortnightly email that comes out to members. So we're constantly trying to keep members updated in those ways. But if there's anything specific for a ward councillor, then they will be invited through the normal process for finding out. And then in terms of moving money in terms of cost inflation. So at the moment, all the projects as outlined in the Cabinet report will be going forward as they are. We, as I think I mentioned at the previous meeting, we are working on each of those to understand that inflationary and cost pressures, and where we can, looking at value engineering, private sector funding or other public funding. So we have now submitted our stage 1 application for the Clock House and should hear later on in this year, and we've also submitted our expression of interest to the Lottery Fund for the Theatre Royal and working with Arts Council. So it's on a project by project basis that we're looking at the moment. In terms of future movement of money, as I said, any of those decisions will come back to Cabinet.
Okay, members, I've got Councillor Austin indicated and Councillor Green and Councillor Curry, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, huge congratulations on being selected for this pilot. It sounds really, really good news. As somebody who ran a national charity with innumerable different government contracts, I know how incredibly time-consuming it is, different reporting schedules. So having this all coherent is going to free up a lot of officer time and hopefully reduce the amount of stress on yourselves and help things run much more efficiently. The red, amber, green thing looks excellent and is precisely the sort of thing that we have talked about for scrutiny, the kind of reporting that we were asking for, not for you or colleagues to turn up every time, Louise, and give us a detailed report, but that sort of very simple, like we get from our tenant and leasehold service, for example, that sort of, have we met this, have we drawn down that, if we haven't, why not, what's the problem? And we felt that as a scrutiny panel, and a number of us felt that was a really important part of our role in view of the enormous size and impact of the various projects. So we'd be delighted to be able to share through this panel in that process as things go through to Cabinet. That would be extremely helpful to us to help with our monitoring and scrutiny function. I'd got a couple of questions. The first one was about the governance structure, the overseeing and whatever, and how members of the public, how businesses and so on would get involved in that. And then the second one was probably rather more Ramsgate specific, although I'm sure it has generic applications, which is about where there might be possibilities of finessing things so that they fit together better, my example would be the future high streets money for the road by the harbour and the clock house and the town square and all of that, and the suggestions that we've made about ways that those could be made more coherent and we could get better value out of it. But I'm sure there are examples elsewhere as well, and how much flexibility you think you're going to have as far as those kinds of things are concerned.
Thank you. Yeah, we are hoping that it will reduce admin and we can spend more time working on the projects. So the governance arrangements, one of the things that because it isn't a decision-making board, often people don't necessarily want to get so involved because the juicy bit has been done. We also are mindful that we don't want it to be too large so that those discussions are harder to have. So because there are a number of organisations as well that have to be on it, so we'll send out an invite to each of those county and town councils and stroke charter trustees to put forward a representative to be on that. We are also then looking at organisations, so businesses and or community groups that have an understanding of managing large sums of money, so that they understand about budgeting, risk, delivery mechanisms and timescales, so that they can easily then participate in the discussion around managing this funding. So the next step will be after Cabinet approvals is to then work through and look at each of those organisations that could be on it and send out various invites on that basis. We are looking at whether it's Thanet-wide businesses or if it's, for example, one business from each of the towns, because we want to make sure that it's an easy discussion and not a very town-focused discussion. So, yeah, that will be the process. Oh, sorry, and the finessing. So the two highway schemes are now going to be brought together. So we will send it out as a single contract. It makes much more sense, and there is an opportunity within that to finesse what that might look like and how we can make that work. So, yeah, we're really pleased about that.
And there will be other opportunities like that elsewhere across the programme?
Yes, potentially, yeah. And we will look at those.
Great, fantastic.
Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, I too welcome the simplification. Anything that cuts down on the administrative burden is a good thing. So well done for that. I must admit, I would feel more comfortable if there were two boards, one for each town. I think I heard you just say you didn't want it to be town-centred, but these bids are town-centred inevitably. Have you considered having two boards rather than one?
We haven't, on the basis that we are following the guidance that says to have one consolidated governance arrangement. So in some of the other areas, they may well have two town deals because some of the other local authorities are metropolitan areas. So they may well have two town deal boards already. So the point is about consolidating, having a very focused board. You know, there may well be some support for decision makings, but the local authority is the accountable body, so it will be making those decisions on that town. If there are changes, as Councillor Austin suggested, of some finessing of some of the projects, the board is about testing the governance arrangements, making sure that from a high level, you know, is delivery on time? If it's not, why not? So although the projects are specific to the town, actually those delivery mechanisms should be at a strategic level, and it is a strategic oversight board. If we had two, one for Margate and Ramsgate, it doesn't actually reduce much of the admin burden on the council in terms of managing those, and it makes more sense to have one set of reporting to one board. But we want to make sure that we have representatives, and there'll also be learning across representatives from the different towns as well, and we felt that was important.
Councillor Curry.
Thank you for your report, Louise. I did read all of it earlier on, and I did make some observations, so this isn't so much a question, but some observations I made. I do think that this new arrangement is a positive step. It certainly should make the administration of the 3 schemes more straightforward, with less red tape. Going forward, all the projects have been identified, and it makes sense that any decisions about redistributing funding are made by those actually working on these projects and who have full access to costing and timelines. Of course, I'd like to see every project take shape. However, any match funding organisation who, for whatever reason, is unable to deliver their project should contact the new Pathfinder board and be honest about their situation, so other arrangements can be made and any further delays to the management of these projects are avoided. These levelling up projects are in place for the good of our communities and should not be used as a means to criticise officers and members who are doing their best to deliver and support them, but sometimes do not have the right to reply. Thank you.
Did you want to come back on that?
Thank you.
I'm not sure if there was a question there or just a comment. So we move on. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Again, Louise, I think this is really welcome news because when we last met at this committee, I asked the question on behalf of many people about why we weren't further forward. You explained, very small department, under-resourced. And perhaps we're getting a better understanding of the administrative burden, which has perhaps taken focus off of delivery, if we're honest. And I'm not trying to be, I welcome also the flexibility that is appearing, because our original understanding was that there was a degree of flexibility within the projects as they scoped out. Then we were told that everything is ring-fenced. This puts that flexibility back into it. I've got a couple of requests, if you like, particularly with regard to specific projects, because are we saying, for example, and we know there's an issue with the Smack Boys Home project and the Bijou Hotel, whatever we're calling it this week. That building, however, and it's now grade 2 star listed, of course, which has been upgraded, can we have an assurance that if funds are reallocated away from that to help deliver something else, which may well have to happen, that the fabric of that building, that can be written in and that project is set in stone, because it is an integral part of the structure there. So whilst that may have to evolve, can we please protect the fabric, whatever its ultimate use? With regard to the board, as I say, I think it's an excellent idea because it starts to work to the KISS principle of keep it simple. Yeah. However, is it intended, because it provides a degree of scrutiny, which this panel are already with a programme to provide, can you confirm it is in no way intended to it supplements rather than supplants our role in ensuring transparency and scrutiny of the decisions as they go along? Because we tonight, we're live streamed, we're public, and this is in the public domain. This board will meet behind closed doors and therefore isn't subject to the same degree of scrutiny. Therefore, it must surely come under our scrutiny. Will you still be reporting to us? Or will the steering committee be reporting to us? How will that be framed?
So, in terms of the reallocation of funding around the Smack Boys, each of the projects have a set of outputs and outcomes that have to be delivered as part of the programmes. Those don't change. We have confirmed to central government that we will deliver those when we were awarded the funding. So if funding is reallocated, outputs and outcomes still have to be delivered. So what we can't do, for example, with the Smack Boys, is say, spend money on the outside of the building and deliver no outputs and outcomes as far as central government is concerned. So we are still, though, looking at the opportunities for that building. We are working very closely with our property team and the harbour team to think about the future uses of that building and how we make sure that it's safeguarded, because it's a beautiful building and it's fundamental to the harbour structures, and that's incredibly important. So
it's a brick in the wall, isn't it? So.
it is. So we are all working together to consider what the opportunities for the future of that building are. If it isn't a restaurant with rooms, an entertainment space, which has proved to be challenging, as I mentioned last time. In terms of the board and the role of overview and scrutiny panel, so the council remains the accountable body. Cabinet is the decision maker, and as I said, the report outlines that any decisions that need to be made in terms of changes within the projects will come to Cabinet. They are likely to be key decisions, and so they will come through this process. All of the contracting arrangements for construction will be over the threshold, so they will again go to Cabinet and come through this overview and scrutiny process. So this is about having external review of the processes that we are going through in terms of governance. It doesn't replace a local authority accountable body governance of those arrangements.
Mm-hmm. So we can be comfortable that we will still get the same degree or more of feedback. Will it come from that? Should we expect to be updated by that committee though, or will it still be from yourselves as head of regeneration? And
yeah, you don't get rid of me that easily.
It will
still come through the programme management team, rather than the kind of wider governance.
So there is no
arrangements.
change to our current sort of scrutiny arrangements, or nothing proposed there?
No.
I do have a couple of other questions, Chair, if it's okay to continue. Which also, with regard to, I think you've explained how the members will be identified, because effectively this panel will have those that are in place by definition of their role out external to the panel, and there are those that are then obviously recruited and invited. How will they be selected? Will the sort of, if you like, the statutory element of the panel discuss that, or will it be down to an individual or just chair's discretion, or is there an open process on that so that?
We're discussing that with Cabinet at the moment in terms of what's the best way. So essentially we're talking about probably 4 seats. So 2 business representatives and 2 community representatives. And as I mentioned to earlier, we want to make sure that we are looking at organisations that have the skills and understanding of large scale sums of money and how that is managed. Because we understand that that's very different to perhaps managing a small community organisation or for someone running a small business. And we don't have a huge number of those kinds of organisations in the district. No. So it will probably be quite a small pool to be looking at. So we're just working through that at the moment, and working with the leader. And as it says in the Cabinet report, it will be for him to approve those members.
Because in the original brief to this, it was mentioned, I remember as well, that members of that board, where possible, would use their external connections to enhance the process and all the rest of it. And although they're limited, there are people who have worked behind the scenes, there are other projects, and I think some of them have been discussed behind the scenes. They bring a wealth and a connection that can, for example, on the Green Campus, there's an opportunity to bring in a large amount of internal investment from the private sector, which then fulfills what the Levelling Up Fund was set out to do. But these things need to be discussed and brought in, I think, at this point, and therefore, should those, that will come through this board as a steering board, or?
So those are all programme management issues or activities. So we are doing all of those things, talking with public and private sector and funding organisations to do that. This board isn't about changing the projects or necessarily adding to them. It's about is the funding being spent in the right way? Are the budgets being looked at, the delivery timescales, the risk? It isn't necessarily about saying, oh, I can add value to that because I work in that sector.
No, this
that
is
will
specific,
happen now.
yeah.
That's all happening already from a project and programme management point of view.
Okay, thank you very much. One other question, which I must ask at this point, because the recommendations go through. We're awaiting the start of this procurement process to identify operators for the for release on the ferry side of things. Yeah. Without getting into a long rhetoric, there are massive concerns right across the community about the delivery of this in terms of the vessels existing. Whilst we're talking about going out and seeking operators, can we perhaps include some form of identification and guarantee necessary of how they would provide this? Because the leader this week put a piece out, or last weekend put a piece out in the Isle of Thanet news, which has made people's spines chilled in Ramsgate, talking about another year or two. Now, we either have people chomping at the bit to come here and operate, or we don't. There are 185-metre vessels scrapped in the last 3 months that are on the beaches in Turkey. So whoever is expressing interest, I do not believe, have our best interests at heart in terms of providing a ferry service. And what we don't need to be is an overspill for other ports, non-desirable freight or whatever. If we're going to have a ferry service, let's be honest about it. But we must have identification of these vessels because we have a net zero commitment. And if we start bringing in a lot of old vessels to this port, then that has net zero implications because of the emissions. And exactly the same as the Manston situation. I hope we've got provision made for those things to be taken into account before we go spending money on infrastructure for something that may not be deliverable.
I'll start, but feel free. We will be going through a really robust process because none of us want to see something fail. So in terms of the commissioning process around the concession, it will be robust. There are questions that relate to the things that you've just talked about in terms of potential where the operators might come from and contacts that they have. There will be questions in there about our net zero commitment and how they will work within that. So it will be a really robust process. We are working through all of those documentation in order for it to be able to go out to the marketplace, so that we have everything there up front for potential port operators, because we're not talking about ferry operators directly, we're talking about operators of the port, for them to be able to use and put together their proposals for managing and operating that part of the Port of Ramsgate. It will be an open and, as I said, robust process. And we are using an external legal team to support us in that, who, you know, are well connected and have significant experience within this sector and of running similar processes. So we are pretty confident that what we put out and therefore what we will get back will be really robust in terms of, I've used that word a lot, haven't I? In terms of our ability to manage it and understand deliverability of their proposals coming forward. Have I missed anything?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think you have missed any. I think it's just worth saying that robust process will include several stages. So there's an initial tender stage, and then a dialogue stage, and then a final tender stage. The criteria will include sort of quality and risk criteria, as well as the financial, the income criteria as well. So the tenders are all written around the best value argument and making sure that those qualities, such as health and safety and net zero and those sort of things, the commercial viability, their sort of maintenance requirements and all those sort of things are included in their tender submission.
Thanks, Mike. That is encouraging, and as I say, I think I want to make it clear that nobody is trying to be a blocker here or anything, and we would all love a vision of, you know, daiquiris on the poop deck in the sunset as we sail out of Ramsgate. There has to be a vessel that fits the geographical limitations, and as I say, there's also the other concerns with the rest of the Infrata report with that channel and how it relates. We've been talking about the coastline tonight. Part of the reason the North Kent Marine Protection Zone comes round to the pier is specifically to protect that chalk reef, which the Infrata report says that for Ramsgate to be long-term viable needs to be widened and deepened. Well, that's not going to happen with the protections that are on it. So those are the concerns as to how you can make this thing configured to fit the vessels that are viable. And in the report it does say, be advised, that the recommendations support the viability of delivery. And these are the concerns as to why it may be that the business plan looks fine on paper, all very nice ideas, but you can't run a double-decker bus out of a bungalow's garage. And that whoever comes along and says we can operate a port and have the experience, they must have access to the vessels, and there are many who don't believe those exist. So please, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
I just want to pick up on one thing, and it actually follows on from something Councillor Davis said earlier, which was about the level of interest in the communities about what's happening with these projects and about how you're planning on sharing the information about the changes, and hereafter how that information will be shared with the people who are most affected out there. You talked about events, which is brilliant. I'm thinking about website and other kinds of consultation and information activities.
Generally, I'm hoping that we don't have many changes because, you know, we've done a lot of work in terms of pulling these projects together. You know, we're not going into this anticipating that we will have lots of changes. We, you know, I think we've probably been through the hardest part in terms of increasing costs and the inflation. So at the moment we're hoping to manage those, and as we talked at the last meeting, some, you know, value engineering will have to happen or looking for other funding. At the moment the biggest change is around the SMAC buoys. If there are changes on specific projects that include specific stakeholders, we'll be talking to them anyway and working with them anyway. This isn't about the local authority making changes without understanding the impact of that. So, you know, hopefully there won't be lots of changes, but we will be working with all the individual stakeholders, and then through the normal process of, as I said, coming back to Cabinet, we'll have to do engagement in that way, and then if there is a change and there's funding become available, we will ultimately look within the different intervention areas. So in Ramsgate, you know, harbour or port, or in Margate around Warple Bay, or the active movement and connections, we would look within those before we considered anything else. But we also have to be mindful of the impact of inflation. So whether some of that be covered by those rather than starting brand new projects.
The other thing was you talked about learning between the towns and so on, and I was wondering about within this project, the 10 authorities, will there be opportunities to network and learn from each other? Because it seems like a great opportunity if there is.
I mean, I suspect there will be, and I suspect central government will bring us all together in a room. You know, it's challenging spending time doing those sorts of things while we're working across the delivery. But we have done that, particularly in the southeast on Towndale, and now across East Kent we talk a lot about levelling up. So you know, some of that already exists.
It's not a machine gun. One point, the partnership board. When is it envisaged that will convene, and what's the time frame for launch of it?
It's a really good question. I have asked central government at what point they're going to finalise everything. So it's not particularly an approval process, but they just want to check and challenge the investment plan and make sure it's yes. Yeah. So we have to report back in terms of, in the investment plan it says what our plan is to do, and we will share the cabinet paper with them so they can see what our next steps are. And as I said, we have a good relationship with the department anyway. We are waiting to hear back, but we've said to them that we do want to set up a board meeting as soon as we can. Obviously, we'll need to go through a process to do that. But yeah, I'm hoping it'll be imminent that we hear back from them.
Thanks, Louise. That's very useful. And one final question, if I could, that's sprung to mind. There was a breakdown of the various interventions and aimed outcomes with a budget, but where can we find the breakdown of those budgets?
Do you mean in the new pilot?
In the report, there were the 5 intervention areas, and there are budgets. They're obviously headline budgets, but where can we find the breakdown of how those figures break?
So we haven't shared that as yet. The budgets haven't changed per project.
Right.
So all of those budgets that we've previously reported for Levelling Up Town Deal, Future High Street Fund, all remain the same. As I said, at a project level, everything at the moment remains the same. We have looked at some reallocation in terms of the smack boys, but we've made that relatively generic at the moment so that we can do a bit more work to kind of target where that investment goes. But as it stands, those projects haven't changed in terms of their budgets. It's a bit, I mean, it's not a helpful process in a way, because they've asked us to map the projects across the new interventions and then split out the budget on that basis. So if it's 50-50 on 2 interventions and it's £1 million, there's £500,000 in each. So for the purposes of projects, the budgets remain as have been previously reported.
But those figures that are allocated are notional allocations as opposed to costed figures that are based on because the projects obviously aren't developed to the point where you can have a fully costed.
It remains within the funding that has been allocated from central government.
So it is
on
it's an allocated
basis,
budget
yes.
rather than an established.
Yeah, because we have to
plan.
keep within those budgets.
Yeah. Okay. And when will it be item by item that the business plan unrolls on those, or so that there is a justification for how those figures are arrived at prior to?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
If, for argument's sake, let's use the fishing facilities as an example, and I can't remember, I think it was 3.5 million, let's say, the figure. Obviously, that 3.5 million is an allocation from the grant, but becomes part of a costed budget in order to deliver the project. Now, again, like the Smack Boys Home, we're well aware that the fishermen's facility is let's call it a state of flux at the moment. Excuse me. At what point could we expect to see, though, costed breakdowns so that instead of it being a notional budget, we've then got an understanding of what that will cost to deliver? Because if we don't get that, it's never going to get delivered.
So that will be through the REBA stages. So we're at REBA stage 2, moving into 3. Right. We are putting together the packs to commission the last stages and construction. So you'll then be able to see through that process what the final costs are, and where we will have had to have done value engineering, as we highlighted at the last meeting. The footprint is slightly smaller. It doesn't have a first floor, for example, but that means it's within budget. So all of that will come out through those costing exercises for the construction.
Thanks, because it's obviously particularly pertinent at the moment, because with inflation running as it is and everything else and build costs escalating, I'm not sure I'd want to be sitting in your chairs, to be honest. So, you know, this is critique rather than criticising you individually. But what I will say is thank you for your answers. We look forward to further grillings for you, but also well done, because when you put all those funds together, there's quite a substantial chunk that we can make the difference here with. So thank you.
Chair, just on that last question, is it all right if I add a comment? So, yeah, thank you. So Louise talked about the REBA stages, which I think will give clarity to the costs. I think the key point here is that this report is a step in the process, and before we go to procure these works, there's another decision to come. And I think Louise has already said that, there'll be key decisions because of the value of those decisions, which means they'll be made at Cabinet and they'll come here on their passage through to Cabinet. So you will get to see more detail about exactly what is being delivered and exactly what we're anticipating the cost to be. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance.
Thank you very much, Bob. Much appreciated. And, well, I think I'll speak for quite a few colleagues as well. Thank you.
Yeah, on another note, on next week's meeting on the forward plan, you'll see some key decisions that are coming forward. And there'll be another extraordinary meeting in October to discuss those decisions. So, Councillor Bright.
So my question is probably relates to what Bob's just said, and thank you very much for your report. My point here was just how live will our view of this be? Less about the budget and more about the red, amber, green, because what I would hate to happen is the board gets to, this unelected board, well, unelected at certain levels, gets to see progress regularly. I don't really want to be waiting for 2 or 3 months before we come back here and be told that some projects are going to be red at some stages, as you know, before we get to actually start asking questions about why things are happening. So I think there needs to be a level of transparency in terms of the project and how everything's going. Obviously, it's tricky because we don't want to be sharing everything with the public, but from our perspective, I want to be able to know whether I'm going to get a report in, a couple of weeks' time from Phil and the guys to bring to overview and scrutiny, when all of a sudden I'm looking at a lot of red on a page where I somehow am scrabbling around for details. So I'd like a level of transparency there on how the projects are actually progressing.
Thank you. As it currently stands, we don't share the monitoring and evaluation reports, not for any reason other than the decision was taken not to do that, and also they're terrible spreadsheets. But one of the things that we are looking at doing is streamlining our internal governance arrangements as well. So within that, obviously there's the Cabinet and overview and scrutiny process, but also at an officer level, from a senior management and then a project officer. So we are streamlining all of that alongside this, so that there's a really clear flow of information and reporting. And one of the things that we're doing around that is making sure that we have the same documentation across all of the projects and programs. At the moment, they're slightly different just because of the way that the 2 programmes, particularly Town Deal and Levelling Up, were set up. But we are looking at streamlining that, and we can have a headline report that comes out of those to help feed back to members. The other thing that we often do is member briefings. So although I'm not on the next member briefing, undoubtedly there'll be some in the diary to come and present to members more information. We did quite a big members briefing on the port before that went through that Cabinet process, so that we articulated what we were doing and what the next steps would be, and then what the decision making was. So there'll be some more of that coming, and we can do a bit more specific on a project by project basis. But we can look at how we share, as you say, not everything needs to necessarily be in the public domain on a regular basis, but we can look at how we share that information for members.
I think transparency is absolutely key. It's really important that we get to see this, and our job is also to help you guys as well. So you're doing, how many times I see on social media, the council don't do X, Y, and Z, and you've got members popping their heads up and saying, well, actually they do, and here's what the council are doing. So I think it's really important that we know as much as possible, as regularly as possible. And I welcome members' briefings, but some of us don't fear a spreadsheet, so that's not going to be an excuse.
Okay, have we got any further questions? Okay, so we're asked to review the pilot report from Ms Askew, which I think Councillor Davis has actually done on his own. So thank you, Ms Askew, for the report, and we move on to the next agenda item, which is item number 9, the publishing of the TLS annual report. And I call on Ms O'Sullivan, who's managed to wait all this time, to deliver her report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As a social housing provider, we need to produce an annual report to achieve regulatory compliance. It must provide relevant information that enables tenants to scrutinise their landlord's performance. This is our second annual report and it's now ready for publication. As you know, we provide quarterly reports, performance reports to OSP and Cabinet, and they are also scrutinised by our involved tenants and leaseholders. This report gives detail on the team's performance for the year, which we have supported with case studies and photos. We're looking to publish the report on the Council's website. We will also ensure there's a plain text version that can be read by a web reader, and the webpage which will include an equality statement that invites interested parties to request a printed document or in other formats. Hard copies of the report will be taken to community events so that anyone participating can take them away. This report has already been reviewed by the tenant and leaseholder group and will be going to Cabinet for approval to publish on the 21st of September, and looking for any comments here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I've got Councillor Towning who's asked to ask a question. Did you get your question answered in the report, or do you want to...
I think I'm quite happy with what you've just said. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Towning. And I open it up to the members. I've got Councillor Bright and Councillor Austin.
Just a comment, I really enjoyed reading this report. I think it's really good work. Thank you for producing it.
Can I echo that? The words exemplar and good practice spring to mind, most particularly the way that the team is working with tenants, with all the various representative groups, but also all the events that you run. I've been to some of them where I couldn't get to one and sent my apologies. I got documentation the next day from an officer, that sort of engagement, and things like we realised that tenants found our letters threatening. We sat down with tenants and worked out how to make them less so and how to approach that, etc. If we did that across the council, I don't mean that we're threatening it across all aspects of the council, but actually, comms people will have heard me say this dozens of times because this is my background. We send stuff out to members of the public that is incomprehensible very often. It involves our council jargon. It involves technical terminology. We say we will endeavour when we could say we will try. You've done that. You've shown how it works by working with tenants and making it accessible and friendly to tenants, and you're building up those relationships, and the report shows how that works. You're also reporting in very clear, simple ways against a whole series of criteria that we can all understand. Have you met this? Have you nearly met this? Are you way off, and why? That's the kind of reporting I think we want at this panel. And I think that's the kind of reporting that will help build up confidence out there in the community that we are working very hard, and where something isn't working, we're striving very hard to put it right. So brilliant, and thank you.
Councillor Bright.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely echo what Councillor Austin has just said. It's really informative. It's really easy to absorb. It's engaging. It's really lovely to see the photos. Before and after photos are particularly useful. So I think, yeah, I just want to congratulate you, really. I'd like to see more reports like that. I have got a question about the, I don't know whether this is the right forum to raise this, but I noticed underneath the, on the garages, my kind of question about the garages is there a reason why, is it over a third of the garages are currently unoccupied? And if so, is there a way that we can market them a bit better? I mean, to me, it seems like missed income, and also an opportunity to get cars off the roads. Thank you.
Yes, the reason they're unoccupied is because they're not in a state to be able to be occupied at the moment. And what we are doing, and what we have been doing for the last 18 months, is actually running a programme across our garage estates to bring them up to a better standard, and then we are reletting them. We launched recently a new web page and a form, so that interested parties can digitally get hold of us and put themselves on a waiting list. We had to close that waiting list recently because we've got over 200 applicants for garages. So we've got no shortage of interest. It's just getting the garages up and ready to be able to be let, which we are doing rapidly.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay, so we were asked to review Sellers' report, which clearly we've done, and we thank you for coming along this evening. And that's the business for this evening done. So we'll see you all back here next week at the same time.